Hello and welcome, all DSSC aspirants. If you're still watching this channel, it means only one thing: you are serious about cracking DSSC. And trust me, we respect your determination. Friends, our team has launched this brand new question bank series. After reading the book at least once, which all of you must have done by now, and watching our previous videos, we are now bringing you something extremely valuable. These videos will give you a clear understanding of the type of questions you may face. And yes, many of these question styles can reflect in your paper as well. Most of you must be referring to some notes already. But let me say this very clearly: many of those notes are created by aspirants, not experts. So if, while looking at these questions, you feel things are getting difficult, then this is your sign. It's the right time to change your notes. Our expert team has created comprehensive, detailed, and exam-aligned notes. And the best part, each chapter includes the relevance of unrestricted warfare, something almost everyone overlooks but is absolutely crucial. We are not here to make your journey confusing with multiple resources. We want you to have one solid set of notes you can refer to consistently till September 2026. We've also prepared a question bank on unrestricted warfare, notes on the Indo-Peacekeeping Force, IPKF. Both of these are usually neglected by aspirants, but they should not be, especially if you aim to be among the top performers. So, if you haven't already, book your PDF now. Alright friends, let's dive straight into Chapter 2, Question Bank. Get your notes ready. Let's begin. Alright friends, as promised, let's begin with Chapter 2, the Implosion Headquarters. Let's jump into the question bank. And as always, we'll cover the question, the aspects of the question you must address, and the model answer, and at last its relevance with unrestricted warfare. So stay tuned till the end and don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Alright friends, now let's begin with question number 1 from Chapter 2, the Implosion Headquarters. This is one of the most important questions because it helps us understand how political interference inside the army weakened professional leadership and how this later influenced India's military performance. Let us first look at the question. Question 1 states, General B. M. Bidji Kaul's rapid rise in the Indian Army was marked by political patronage, weak professional grounding, and intra-service friction. Discuss A. Kaul's relationship with Nehru and Krishna Menon and how this shaped his career. B. The critique of Kaul's lack of combat and regimental experience and its impact on his credibility within the army. C. The long-term implications of politically driven promotions on civil-military relations and operational effectiveness. Let me first explain the question in simple words, and then we will answer all the parts one by one. This question is about General B. M. Bidji Kaul, a senior officer whose rise in the army became controversial. The question asks us to discuss 3 things. A. His relationship with Prime Minister Nehru and Defence Minister Krishna Menon, and how that relationship helped him rise rapidly. B. Why many officers criticized him for having no real combat or regimental experience, and how that affected his credibility. C. What happens to a country when promotions are based on politics rather than professionalism? Basically, the long-term impact on the army and national security. Now let's break down each part with clear, simple explanations. Let's start with part A. Here we talk about how political support helped Kaul rise faster than normal army rules would allow. 1. Nehru's patronage. Kaul had a close personal relationship with Prime Minister Nehru. Nehru trusted him and gave him important political tasks even when he was still junior. Because of Nehru's support, Kaul moved up the hierarchy much faster than officers with better field experience. 2. Krishna Menon's support. Defence Minister Menon saw Kaul as a loyal officer who would support his decisions. Menon often pushed Kaul forward, even when senior army leaders like General Thimayya opposed those promotions. An example is Kaul's appointment as Quartermaster General QMG, where professional objections were ignored. 3. Career driven by politics. Because of strong political backing, Kaul bypassed normal army traditions and checks. He eventually became a major power center in army headquarters, something many officers viewed as unhealthy for the institution. So friends, that was part A. Now let's look at the criticism Kaul faced from inside the army. This part deals with why many senior officers felt Kaul did not have the skills required for high-level military command. 1. Weak professional grounding. Early in his career, Kaul shifted to the Army Supply Corps, not a combat arm. He never commanded a fighting unit. He had no battlefield or operational experience, which is essential for a senior general. 2. Criticism from senior officers. Many senior officers wrote that Kaul had reached his professional limit. General Thimaiya openly said Kaul had never been a combat soldier. This made many inside the army doubt his ability to lead during war. 3. Loss of credibility within the army. Officers felt he was promoted because of politics, not merit. This created distrust, friction, and low morale among professionals. Many believed that if the army ignored merit, the consequences would be serious. And now, we come to part C, the long-term results of such political interference. This is where we see the bigger picture, how political influence inside the army affected strategy, leadership, and finally the nation's security. 1. Breakdown of professional leadership. Capable officers like Thimaiya and Thorat were sidelined. Promotions became more about loyalty to the minister than actual military capability. This weakened the army's ability to make independent professional decisions. 2. Faulty strategic decisions. Important assessments like the Thorat Plan and Lal Killa report were ignored. Soldiers were pushed into NEFA without proper preparation or logistics. These errors contributed directly to India's failures in 1962. 3. Civil-military imbalance. Political interference reduced the army's institutional autonomy. When politics overtakes professionalism, national defense becomes risky. The 1962 war showed how dangerous such distortions can be. So friends, that completes the answer. But the question becomes even more meaningful when we connect it with unrestricted warfare. Now let's see how this entire topic links with concepts from unrestricted warfare, especially from these two chapters. The weapons revolution, which invariably comes first. The war gods phase has become indistinct. Here's the simple understanding. Chapter: The weapons revolution, which invariably comes first. India's action. Political favor pushed Kaul upward. Professional military advice was ignored. Leadership became weak at the top. China's action. Strengthened the PLA. Improved logistics and trained troops. Prepared early and thoroughly. Lesson: modern wars are not won on the battlefield first. They are won in preparation, leadership, and planning. China prepared. India didn't. This is exactly what unrestricted warfare warns against. Chapter: The war gods phase has become indistinct. India's action. Military warnings were dismissed. Leadership believed that political narratives and diplomacy would stop war. China's action. Built strength quietly. Used diplomacy to delay India's response. Then struck with full preparedness. Lesson: in modern warfare, strategic deception plus readiness are far more decisive than political speeches or assumptions. So friends, this was question 1 with complete relevance to unrestricted warfare. Now let's move to question 2. Friends, this is a very important question because it shows how poor planning, wrong deployment, and weak leadership created a disaster years before the 1962 war actually began. First, let's understand what the question is asking. Question 2 states, the deployment of 4 Infantry Division to NEFA in 1959-60 represented a case of wrong troops, wrong place, wrong time. Discuss. A. The condition, composition, and suitability of 4 Division for mountain warfare. B. Logistical, intelligence, and command and control shortcomings during the deployment. See how these systemic failures shaped the situation leading to the 1962 debacle. Friends, this question talks about the deployment of the 4 Infantry Division to NEFA in 1959-60. The phrase used is wrong troops, wrong place, wrong time. The question has 3 parts. A. Were the troops of 4 Division even suitable for mountain warfare? B. What logistic, intelligence, and command problems existed during this deployment? C. How did these failures directly contribute to the defeat in 1962? Now let's explain each part clearly and simply. Part A asks, was 4 Division the right force for NEFA? The answer is simple. No. They were completely unsuitable. Let's see why. 1. Wrong training background. 4 Division was trained for plains warfare, not mountains. Their equipment, weapons, and artillery were designed for flat terrain, not high-altitude Himalayan conditions. 2. Limited mountain experience. The troops had no experience in mountain warfare. Their doctrines and training still followed World War II plains and jungle fighting, not the complex terrain of NEFA. 3. Poor force distribution. Brigades were scattered far apart across NEFA. Because of this, units had no cohesion, no mutual support, and no ability to reinforce each other. Simple summary. 4 Division was not trained, not equipped, and not structured for Himalayan operations. Now that we understand their unsuitability, let's see the bigger problem, the system itself. This is the part where the internal weaknesses of the system become very visible. 1. Weak logistics. Beyond Bomdila, there were no proper roads. Movement depended on porters and ponies, not vehicles. As supply was limited, and troops had poor shelters and almost no winter infrastructure. 2. Intelligence gaps. Hardly any information existed on Chinese positions or the terrain. Communication between army units and Assam Rifles posts was unreliable. The leadership was essentially blind to what the PLA was doing. 3. Broken command structure. Professional leaders like Thimeya and Thorat were sidelined. Kaul's influence dominated key decisions in Delhi. Orders were issued from political circles with little real understanding of the ground situation. Simple summary. Troops entered NEFA undersupplied, uninformed, and poorly commanded. With all these problems, the result was almost predictable. And that brings us to part C. This part explains how mistakes made in 1959-60 created the conditions for disaster in 1962. 1. Overextended forward deployment. Troops were pushed too close to the border without support or logistics. Many posts were isolated and tactically weak. 2. No real defensive plan. The well-prepared Thorat plan for defense in depth was ignored. No fallback positions, no fortifications, and no structured defensive lines were built. 3. Confusion and low readiness. Political interference replaced military judgment. Troops were unprepared, scattered, and uncertain about orders. They faced a fully prepared PLA, while India's side had neither training nor support. To summarize, we can say that these systemic failures, wrong troops, bad logistics, poor intelligence, and weak command set the stage for India's collapse in 1962. Now friends, let's connect this with the ideas from Unrestricted Warfare. Two chapters explain this situation perfectly. Chapter: New Methodology of War Games. India's action. Sent unprepared plains troops into mountains. Logistics were weak and outdated. China's action. Built strong roads, good supply lines, and trained mountain troops well in advance. Lesson: modern war needs long-term, multi-domain preparation. China had it. India did not. Chapter: The weapons revolution comes first. India's action. Political interference weakened leadership. Deployment decisions were not based on military logic. China's action. Strengthened military structure, training, and infrastructure early. Lesson: Wars are won before they start, through preparation, leadership, and planning. And in this case, China prepared early, India faltered. So friends, that completes question 2. Now let's move to question 3. This question is extremely important because it explains how confusion at the top and wrong maps on the table pushed India into establishing the Dhola Post right in disputed territory. And this single decision later became the trigger point, the casus belli, for the 1962 war. Question number 3 states, analyze how flawed civil-military communications and map inaccuracies contributed to the establishment of the Dhola Post in disputed territory. Why did this become the casus belli for the 1962 war? Friends, this question has 3 parts. A. How flawed civil-military communications led to the establishment of Dhola Post. B. How wrong maps and misinterpretation contributed to the mistake. C. Why Dhola became the spark that ignited the 1962 war. Let's break it down. This part explains how confusion between Delhi and the field led to a post being set up in an area whose status was not even clear. 1. Confused command links. Too many actors were involved. Army Headquarters, Corps Headquarters, Eastern Command, the Ministry of External Affairs, and Assam Rifles. Orders kept circling around, but no one took final responsibility. Decisions were unclear, delayed, and often contradictory. 2. Field objections ignored. Officers on the ground, Brigadier Dalvi, Major General Niranjan Prasad, and Lieutenant General Umrav Singh, clearly said Dhola was in a disputed zone. Their warnings were sent upward, but never acted on. 3. Ambiguous Mia instructions. Mia's note said, "We may permit the army." This line gave no clear boundary and no confirmed map coordinates. Army interpreted it as a green signal to set up a post. 4. Pressure from Kaul in Delhi. General Kaul accused field commanders of delaying and pushed them to set up the post immediately. Dhola was created without coordination, without clarity, and without proper approval. Friends, wrong communication, no clarity, and pressure from the top led to Dhola being established in the wrong place. Now let's see how bad maps made the situation even worse. Now, let's move to the next part. Friends, this part shows how inaccurate maps created false confidence. 1. Faulty and incomplete maps. The Director of Military Survey admitted, "Our maps are inaccurate and sketchy." The maps used in NEFA were outdated and unreliable. 2. Trijunction confusion. The map-based trijunction point did not match with the actual ground position. Earlier discussions between Mia and China had placed the point further north, but the army was never informed. So Army Headquarters worked with wrong reference points. 3. Misplaced confidence. Based on these bad maps, Army HQ believed Dhola was inside Indian territory. This false assumption led to the establishment of a post India could not justify internationally. Smooth summary. Wrong maps created a wrong belief, and that mistake placed India and China face to face. And now, the most important part. Why did Dhola Post become the spark that lit the fire of 1962? Now, let's move to the last part of the question as why Dhola became the casus belli of the 1962 war. Friends, China saw Dhola as an encroachment. Dhola was south of Thagla Ridge, which China claimed as its own territory. India's forward move was seen as crossing the line. 2. Direct face-off. PLA occupied the high ground on Thagla Ridge. India sat below at Dhola. This created a natural confrontation zone. 3. Forward policy triggered the crisis. Dhola became the symbol of India's forward policy. China called it nibbling and prepared to respond. 4. No withdrawal plan, no defense plan. Dhola was isolated, undersupplied, and tactically weak. There were no fallback positions. 5. Standoff escalated into war. In September 1962, China demanded withdrawal. India refused. Both sides built up forces. Skirmishes followed. And then war. To summarize it, we can say that Dhola Post turned a boundary disagreement into an open conflict. This single mistake, born from wrong maps and wrong communication, became the trigger for the 1962 war. Now friends, let's link this to unrestricted warfare, because the concepts fit perfectly. Chapter: New Methodology of War Games. India operated with poor maps, weak intelligence, and confused command structure. China held superior ground positions, used Indian mistakes to strengthen their strategic advantage. Lesson: without multi-domain situational awareness, a nation walks blindly into conflict. Chapter: War Gods phase has become indistinct. India: political assumptions replaced military clarity. Decisions were emotional, not strategic. China used ambiguity, positioning, and timing to gain leverage. Lesson: modern conflict is shaped long before open fighting through deception, positioning, and information advantage. Friends, if you're liking this video, please like, share, and subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Your support motivates our team to bring even deeper and more meaningful content for DSSC preparation. Now, let's move to question number 4. Now we come to a question that reveals something very important. Something that directly shaped the outcome of 1962. This is question 4, and it deals with how two brilliant officers, General Thorat and Brigadier Palit, looked at the same terrain, but reached very different conclusions. And because of those differences, India entered the war without a clear defensive plan. Question number 4 states, evaluate the assessment errors made by both Thorat and Palit regarding the defensive potential of Tawang, Sela, and Bomdila. How did these doctrinal disagreements affect India's posture? This question asks us 3 things. A. What assessment mistakes did General Thorat make? B. What mistakes did Brigadier Palit make? C. And how did these disagreements weaken India's defensive posture? Let's start with Thorat, then smoothly move to Palit, and finally understand how the confusion between the two affected the entire army. First, let's start with Thorat's assessment errors. Friends, General Thorat was one of the army's sharpest minds, but even he had blind spots. 1. Overvaluing Tawang. He placed Tawang inside his second-tier defense line. But here's the problem. Tawang could be easily bypassed. There were Chinese tracks from Bamla that allowed PLA to go around Tawang and attack from behind. So Thorat's plan looked strong on paper, but weak on the ground. 2. Planning from maps, not from terrain. Thorat drew his main defensive line between Tawang and Bomdila, but he made this plan without actually visiting the terrain. He didn't recognize Sela as a powerful natural barrier, something that later officers realized. 3. Unrealistic lateral coordination. He suggested one long defensive line, but NEFA had almost no lateral roads, meaning Battalion A could not support Battalion B even if both were under attack. A defensive line with no connection is not a line, it's a hope. Now, if Thorat had his blind spots, Palit had his own. Let's shift from Thorat's map-based planning to Palit's early misjudgments on the ground. Moving next, let's talk about Palit's assessment errors. Friends, Brigadier Palit walked the ground, but even then, his early conclusions created confusion. 1. Undervaluing Sela at first. Sela stands at 13,700 feet. Initially, Palit dismissed it as tactically unsuitable. But in reality, Sela was the strongest choke point in the entire sector. This early dismissal pushed the army away from its best defensive ground. 2. Misreading Tawang's strength. When he saw Tawang, he realized something crucial. Tawang sits on a slope, not a dominating ridge. But before this realization came, his earlier reports had already influenced HQ decisions. Troops were moved forward, based on an assumption that wasn't accurate. 3. Focusing on tactics, missing the strategy. Palit looked at the local terrain features, but missed the bigger picture: depth defense, supply lines, fallback positions, and long-duration sustainability. He understood trees, but not the forest. So now we've seen Thorat's errors and Palit's errors. But the real trouble came when these two perspectives collided. One officer believed in depth, the other leaned toward forward defense. And the result was confusion that shaped India's posture in the worst possible way. Now, let's move to the last part of the question, that is how doctrinal disagreements affected India's posture. Let us understand it in point form. 1. No clear defensive philosophy. Thorat said, fight in depth. Palit said, hold the forward line. There was no unified doctrine. No single strategy. Just conflicting ideas floating in HQ. 2. Chaos in deployment. So what happened? Troops were placed forward in Tawang and Namkachu, in positions that could not be held, supported, or reinforced. Soldiers became isolated and exposed. 3. Leadership exploited the confusion. The men in Kaul leadership ignored both Thorat and Palit whenever convenient. They cherry-picked ideas that fit their political agenda. The result? No coherent plan for NEFA. 4. Doctrinal vacuum before the war. And by the time 1962 arrived, India had no depth defense, no prepared defensive line, no agreement on where the main battle should be fought, no clear doctrine. The army was forced to react to China instead of shaping the battlefield. Friends, when professional disagreements are not resolved, when there's no unified doctrine, an army may stand on the border, but it stands without direction. Now friends, let's link this to the ideas of unrestricted warfare, because this is where the lesson becomes crystal clear. Chapter: What do Americans gain by touching the elephant? India. Professionals disagreed internally. Unity of thought was missing. China maintained one cohesive understanding of terrain and strategy. Lesson: disunity creates gaps your enemy will exploit. Chapter: Seeking rules of victory. India allowed political pressure to override doctrinal clarity, reacted to terrain instead of shaping it. China took dominating ridges, controlled the battlefield before the first shot was fired. Lesson: victory belongs to the side that shapes the geography, not the side that rushes into it unprepared. Friends, I hope you're finding this series deeply insightful. Our team is preparing a complete, consolidated question bank exclusively for those who have booked our PDFs. And yes, this entire question bank will be sent to you free of cost along with all chapter-wise notes. So book your PDF now and learn from the best, expert-prepared material. Now, let's move to the last part of the question series. Friends, now we come to the final and one of the most critical questions of this chapter. If you understand question 5, you understand why India walked into the 1962 war unprepared. This is Operation Onkar, a plan born in Delhi, expanded without coordination, and implemented without preparation. Question 5 states, explain Operation Onkar, 1960 to its objectives, expansion, lack of coordination, and consequences for NEFA. Why was Eastern Command unaware of it until early 1962? Let's break it down step by step, and you'll see how a series of decisions taken far away from the mountains shaped the fate of NEFA. Friends, this question has 5 major parts. A. What were the objectives of Operation Onkar? B. How did the operation expand beyond its original idea? C. Why was there zero coordination between agencies and commands? D. What were the consequences for NEFA? E. And finally, why was Eastern Command not even aware of the operation until early 1962? Let's begin. Let's first start with objectives of Operation Onkar. To understand Onkar, we need to understand the fear driving Delhi at the time. 1. Prevent another Aksai Chin. After losing Aksai Chin due to slow reaction, the Nehru-Menon-Malik triad wanted to block every possible gap along the border. The idea was simple: occupy the area before the Chinese do. Not tactically strong, but symbolically strong. 2. Establish new forward posts. Under Operation Onkar, 24 new posts were ordered across NEFA. But here's the shocker. These posts were designed for presence, not for defense. They were never meant to withstand an attack. So the intention sounded bold. But now let's see how this plan quietly expanded into something far bigger and far more dangerous. Moving to the next part of the question, that is expansion of the operation. 1. Originally meant for Ladakh. Operation Onkar was first meant only for the western sector, where China had already taken Aksai Chin. 2. Kaul expanded it to NEFA and central sector. And then General Kaul, sitting in Delhi as CGS, expanded the plan across the entire border. NEFA, central sector, Ladakh, everywhere. This expansion had no planning, no resources, no logistical study, no terrain assessment. 3. Politically driven timelines. The deadline was set for April 1962. Not because NEFA was ready, but because airlifting posts in Ladakh was easier then. NEFA was dragged into a timeline it was never prepared for. And when a massive border operation is expanded overnight, without structure, without planning, you can imagine what comes next. Chaos. Moving next, lack of coordination. 1. Eastern Command not informed. Perhaps the most unbelievable part. Eastern Command only heard about Operation Onkar in early 1962, months after Delhi had approved it. 2. Parallel decision-making. Decisions were made by the Menon, Kaul, IB axis. They bypassed Army HQ channels, XXXII Corps, 4 Division, Eastern Command, completely outside the military chain of command. 3. Assam Rifles and Army into separate worlds. Assam Rifles reported to the MIA, not to Army commanders. So border posts were being set up, without Army validation, without Army situational awareness. 4. Intelligence not shared. IB withheld important map information and terrain insights. The Army deployed with faulty maps, guesswork, and wishful thinking. So now we have a plan that has expanded too fast, executed without coordination, and built on incomplete intelligence. What happens next? The consequences were catastrophic. Now, moving to the next part of the question, that is consequences for NEFA. 1. Forward posts in indefensible areas. Troops were pushed into places like Namkachu, valleys overshadowed by Chinese-dominated ridges. These positions were militarily suicidal. 2. Escalation of local tensions. From the Chinese perspective, India was nibbling forward. So they occupied Thagla Ridge in response. The standoff intensified. 3. Loss of operational freedom. India boxed itself into positions it could not defend, supply, or reinforce. There was no depth, no mobility, no fallback plan. 4. The trigger for the 1962 war. Dhola Post plus Thagla Ridge is equal to the perfect spark. This became the casus belli for China's October 1962 offensive. Operation Onkar turned the NEFA sector into the powder keg that finally exploded. And all of this brings us to the final question. Why was Eastern Command, the very command responsible for NEFA, not even aware of the operation until early 1962? Now, moving to the last part of the question. Why Eastern Command was unaware until early 1962. 1. Operation conceived in Delhi. It wasn't an army plan. It was a political plus IB creation, bypassing professional channels. 2. Kaul's centralized control. Kaul wanted authority to run through Delhi, not through Eastern Command. He kept the operation tight and exclusive. 3. Secrecy and poor communication. Instructions were vague. Cover all gaps. But no formal briefing, no proper maps, no operational directive. 4. Civilian agencies dominating. IB and MIA issued direct directions to Assam Rifles. Army commanders were left blind. Eastern Command was ordered to execute an operation it never planned. In terrain it never surveyed. With troops it could not support. Now friends, let's link this to the ideas of unrestricted warfare, because this is where the lesson becomes crystal clear. Chapter: Weapons Revolution comes first. India launched Onkar without logistics or preparation. China built roads, strengthened positions, and prepared early. Lesson: the side that prepares first wins before the war begins. Chapter: New methodology of war games. India: intelligence, logistics, operations, all working separately. China: integrated strategy, unified plan, coordinated execution. Lesson: modern warfare demands multi-domain integration, not isolated actions. Friends, with this, we finally come to the end of the chapter to Question Bank. It has been a deep, detailed journey through strategy, leadership, mistakes, and lessons that every serious DSSC aspirant must understand. Our team is fully committed to helping you at every step of your preparation. So if you haven't already, book your PDF now. And this time, along with the main notes and question banks, we have also prepared a brand new PDF on science and military technology, an area many aspirants struggle with, but an area that gives you a huge advantage if mastered. Friends, we are here to make your journey smoother, clearer, and easier. Join us and become one of the achievers of DSSC 2026. All the very best, stay focused, and stay tuned for the next chapter. Jai Hind.